In this episode, we turn our attention to Disaster Recovery Plan, DRP development, with a focus on how to facilitate the work so the plan is realistic, testable, and aligned with what the organization truly needs. Disaster recovery is often imagined as a dramatic moment where someone flips a switch and everything comes back. But in real life, it is a coordinated set of decisions and actions that restore technology services after a disruptive event. A DRP is more technical than a business continuity plan, yet it still needs to be understandable and usable by humans who are stressed and working with limited information. Facilitation matters because different teams often have different assumptions about what recovery means, how fast it must happen, and who is responsible for which steps. On top of that, recovery planning is always constrained by time, resources, and the need to verify that what you planned will actually work. Our goal here is to make those constraints explicit and then use them to build a DRP that improves real recovery outcomes instead of creating false confidence. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is a companion to our course companion books. The first book is about the exam and provides detailed information on how to pass it best. The second book is a Kindle-only ebook that contains 1,000 flashcards that can be used on your mobile device or Kindle. Check them both out at cyber.author.me in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. A useful starting point is to clarify what a DRP is and what it is not, because beginners often mix it up with general incident response or with business continuity. Incident response focuses on detecting and containing an event, especially a security event, while disaster recovery focuses on restoring systems and data so the organization can resume normal or near-normal operations. Business continuity focuses on keeping essential business functions going, often through workarounds, while disaster recovery focuses on bringing technology services back to an operational state. A DRP is also different from a simple backup plan because backups are only one piece of recovery, and they can fail in many ways. The DRP should describe how recovery decisions are made, what order systems are restored in, what resources are required, and how the organization verifies that systems are safe and correct after restoration. When you facilitate DRP development, you are helping teams translate technical complexity into a plan that supports coordinated action under pressure. Time requirements are the first set of constraints that shape DRP development, and they are often misunderstood as a single number. In practice, time requirements include how quickly a system must be available again to meet business needs, how much data loss is acceptable, and how long the recovery process will realistically take given staffing and tooling. Even without focusing on specific technologies, you can understand the time challenge by thinking about two questions. How long can we be down, and how far back can our data be before the business suffers unacceptable harm? Different systems will have different answers, and the plan must reflect that. Facilitating means helping stakeholders agree on priorities, because you cannot restore everything at once, and trying to do so can cause additional errors. Time constraints force the plan to define restoration order, decision points, and clear triggers for escalation. Resource requirements are the second major constraint, and they show up during both planning and real recovery. Resources include skilled people, access rights, documentation, vendor support, compute capacity, network connectivity, and physical access to facilities. Recovery often fails not because the organization lacks the right technology, but because it lacks the practical ability to execute recovery tasks when conditions are degraded. For example, the right staff may be unavailable, access may rely on systems that are down, or vendor support may be slow during a widespread event. Facilitating DRP development means mapping recovery actions to required resources and then asking whether those resources will be available in a disaster scenario. It also means identifying single points of failure in people and permissions, such as only one person knowing how to perform a critical restoration step. When those weaknesses are discovered during planning, they become opportunities to improve resiliency before a crisis. Verification requirements are the third constraint, and they are what separates a theoretical plan from a dependable plan. Verification means confirming that recovery actions produce the intended result, that restored systems function correctly, and that data integrity is preserved. It also means confirming that the plan itself is accurate, current, and feasible, not based on outdated configurations, or optimistic assumptions. In recovery, verification is especially important because restoring systems quickly is not enough if the systems come back corrupted, misconfigured, or still compromised. A DRP should include ways to confirm that services are operational, that critical dependencies are working, and that the restored environment is trustworthy. Facilitating with verification in mind pushes teams to define how they will know they are done, not just how they will start. It also encourages a culture where people do not rush past checks just to report progress. A practical facilitation step is to help teams define scope clearly, because DRP development can expand endlessly if boundaries are not set. Scope includes which systems and services are covered, which environments are included, and what kinds of events the plan is designed to address. The plan does not need to predict every possible disaster, but it should account for the types of disruptions that matter most to the organization, such as loss of a data center, loss of a region, widespread ransomware, or prolonged network outage. Facilitating scope also means clarifying what the DRP assumes about other plans, like whether incident response handles containment before recovery begins. If these boundaries are unclear, teams can argue endlessly about responsibility, and the final plan will be inconsistent. A clear scope helps teams focus on what must be restored, in what order, and under what conditions. Another critical part of facilitation is helping teams identify dependencies, because recovery is rarely about a single system. Systems depend on identity services, network services, storage, time synchronization, and many other foundational components. If the plan attempts to restore an application before the services it depends on are ready, recovery will be slow and confusing. Facilitating DRP development includes building a dependency-aware restoration sequence, where foundational services are recovered first and higher-level services follow in a logical order. This also ties back to time requirements, because a system that looks critical might be impossible to restore quickly if its dependencies are complex or fragile. Beginners often assume you restore the most important system first, but in practice you often restore the building blocks first, so the important system can actually function. When the plan reflects dependency reality, recovery becomes faster and less error-prone. Facilitating also means guiding teams to agree on recovery priorities that align with business needs without ignoring technical constraints. If business leaders want a customer-facing service restored first, but that service relies on several internal systems, the plan must reflect what is realistically possible. This is where communication becomes a core recovery capability, not an extra. A DRP should help translate technical sequencing into language that decision-makers understand, such as explaining that restoring identity and networking first reduces overall downtime for all services. It should also define who communicates status and how, because unclear status updates create panic and lead to uncoordinated actions. Facilitating that alignment in advance reduces conflict during real recovery, when emotions and pressure are higher. The plan becomes a shared agreement rather than a contested narrative. Resource constraints also influence how you design roles and handoffs within the DRP, because recovery tasks are often distributed across teams. A DRP should define who initiates recovery, who performs specific recovery actions, who validates results, and who approves transitions between phases of recovery. Verification should not be left to the same person who performed the restoration step, because independent checks reduce mistakes and reduce the chance of missing subtle integrity issues. Facilitating this role design includes making sure there are backups for key roles, because disaster scenarios can involve staff absence. It also includes ensuring that access rights and authentication methods support recovery, since you cannot restore systems if you cannot log in safely. The plan should consider that some access systems may be down, so alternate access methods must still be controlled and auditable. Clear roles and controlled access paths help prevent recovery from turning into improvisation. Verification requirements also encourage facilitators to include checkpoints that confirm both functionality and trustworthiness. Functionality checks might confirm that services respond, that users can authenticate, and that critical workflows operate. Trustworthiness checks might confirm that restored systems are patched appropriately, that logs are being generated, and that indicators of compromise are not present. Even in beginner language, the idea is simple. You want to be sure the system is not only on, but also correct and safe. This matters because disasters and security incidents can overlap, such as ransomware attacks that force recovery from backups. If you restore without verifying, you can reintroduce the same problem or restore corrupted data. Facilitating DRP development means helping teams build verification into the workflow so it is not skipped when time pressure is intense. Another facilitation challenge is balancing detail with maintainability, because recovery plans can become obsolete quickly. If the plan includes extremely specific technical steps that change whenever systems are updated, the plan may be outdated when needed most. If the plan is too vague, it will not guide action. The facilitator's job is to find the right level of abstraction, such as describing recovery procedures by service group, dependency layer, and validation criteria, while referencing supporting documentation that can be updated more frequently. The plan should clearly identify where detailed procedures are stored and who updates them, without forcing the main DRP to become a constantly changing manual. This approach supports verification too, because it makes it easier to confirm the plan matches the current environment. Maintainability is not glamorous, but it is what makes the plan usable years later. Finally, facilitation should ensure that the DRP connects to broader organizational goals, including learning and improvement. A DRP is not finished when it is written. It becomes stronger through review, exercises, and revision based on what is discovered. Time and resource constraints mean you may start with a plan that covers the most critical systems first and then expand coverage. But verification constraints mean you should not claim readiness until recovery steps have been tested in some way. Facilitating this maturity path means setting expectations. The plan is a living artifact that improves as the organization gains evidence about what works. It also means capturing decisions clearly so future teams understand why priorities and sequences were chosen. When the plan is treated as a real operational capability, not a compliance document, it becomes a reliable tool in moments when reliability matters most. Disaster recovery planning is effective when it is built around realistic time requirements, honest resource constraints, and verification that proves recovery will work under pressure. Facilitating DRP development means clarifying scope, mapping dependencies, aligning priorities between business needs and technical sequencing, and defining roles so recovery tasks are coordinated instead of chaotic. It also means embedding verification so restored systems are functional, accurate, and trustworthy, not merely powered on. When a DRP balances detail with maintainability, it remains usable as systems change, and when it is treated as a living capability, it improves through evidence rather than assumptions. The outcome is a recovery plan that reduces downtime, reduces data loss, and reduces the chance that recovery creates new incidents while trying to solve the original one.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.